My friends in blue showed up at my garage in the form of two police officers in a patrol car. I secretly watched them from my hiding place under the lift. It was unusual to see such happy police officers. Their faces became more serious as they approached me. They confirmed my identity and said they had bad news for me. Something happened to my wife at our house and she was in the hospital, but they couldn't go into detail. I tried to leave immediately, but they stopped me, wanting some answers. They asked where I had been for the last 3 hours. Yes, officer, I've been here all day. Just ask my two mechanics. Sorry, I actually snuck out for about 10 minutes around 11 o'clock a.m. to get coffee for us. One of the policemen went to talk to Mike and Pete, while the other wrote down which coffee shop I had been to. Can you show me your car, sir? He asked. Of course, my truck is outside. I took him outside to my pride and joy. He meticulously inspected the interior, then opened the hood and felt the engine, cold as a stone. All right, sir, you can go to the hospital. I had a look of concern on my face as the hospital staff member explained the extent of Kate's injuries, the fact that she had received a blood transfusion, and then informed me that she was now undergoing surgery. I thought it was very unprofessional of the doctor to have smiled the entire time he was talking to me. Leaving the hospital, I was intercepted by the same two policemen who were at the garage earlier. They wanted some more answers, and we went to the hospital cafeteria for some much-needed coffee. They wanted to know about my relationship with my wife. I explained that we met and got married relatively late, 8 years ago. Kate worked successfully as an attorney for a large local firm. She basically wanted to have children but resisted my pressure until she was almost 40 years old because she wanted to establish herself in her job. They asked me why she was home on a weekday. I explained that Kate had quit her job a month ago to rest before her pregnancy, a sort of vacation before at least 10 years of domestic service. I then concluded that I love my wife, we are doing well, and are looking forward to having a baby. They asked me if I knew a certain John Barton. When I answered no and asked why they were asking, they avoided answering and walked away. I knew I could trust my guys to lock up the garage, so I went straight home. There, 2 forensic scientists and a detective were searching the house. The detective introduced himself and explained what he knew. Then he asked me the same questions as the previous officers, plus one new one. Can you explain why we found a few drops of blood in the downstairs toilet? Sorry, I have no idea, I replied. Detective, may I ask you something? It's clear that you're not treating this as an accident, and also that I'm being treated as a suspect. Can you assure me that you're not just focusing on me as the only subject, but are also looking for the real culprit? You can rest assured, sir, that we are pursuing multiple lines of inquiry. My colleague is now talking to Mrs. Barton. Who is this John Barton I keep hearing about? Sorry, sir. I think it's inappropriate for me to comment on that. He and the CSI team then left, leaving me confused. I went upstairs to the master bedroom and observed the scene unfolding. I would have been shocked if it was the first time witnessing it. Earlier that day, around 10 o'clock a.m. at work, I started thinking about sex. This wasn't unusual. They say men think about sex an average of 67 times per waking hour. Let me tell you, men who have been virtually cut off from their wives for a month can at least double that number. Since Kate quit her job, our 2 to 3 times a week had dropped to almost 0. Kate was either unhappy, bored and depressed, or too tired. Personally, I thought it was because her normal life was almost over, and she was just scared. Being a caring husband, I didn't want to put pressure on her. She will overcome her fear at her own pace. I knew my life would change after having children, but I understood her life would be turned upside down. I kept daydreaming about our sex life in the early years of our marriage. Anywhere, anytime, in any way, we always tried to keep it fresh and new, as long as our imagination continued to exist, and then slowly fell into the automatic mode that too many long-term couples fall into. I snapped out of my stupor. I knew what to do. Bring back spontaneity. Go home right now and have sex with Kate until you're unconscious. Okay, the decision has been made. It's time to go out and go home. I told Mick and Pete I was going away for a while. Pete asked if I could take the car he had just finished servicing for a test drive. When I got home, I was disappointed to see an unfamiliar car in the driveway. Damn it, my friend's visit ruined my plans. I decided to go in anyway. Maybe my friend could be persuaded to leave, and my plans could be saved. Without any suspicion or attempt to hide, I opened the front door. My hair immediately stood on end, and I knew my marriage was over. The clear sounds of ecstatic sexual activity thundered down the stairs. Almost reflexively, I pulled out my phone and started recording a video. Every time a client brought their car to the garage, I always made a quick video recording to ensure we weren't accused of scratching it. With my heart pounding, I ran up the stairs and peered through the bedroom door, camera at the ready. Yes, it was Kate and some guy I didn't recognize, joyfully on our bed. Suppressing the urge to pounce and kill, I turned away. I can honestly say that this was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. My legs could no longer support me, and I collapsed on the floor right outside the door, completely devastated. I was only dimly aware that they were reaching their climax, just around the corner. I don't know how long I stayed there, but gradually I realized that all the sounds of adultery had stopped, leaving only voices. It was just as bad, and still tore me to the core. I knew I had to get out of earshot to give myself time to think. I instinctively knew that any reaction I made based on emotion would, at the very least, land him in the hospital, and me in prison. I needed time to think. I quietly got up from the floor, tiptoed downstairs, and collapsed on the sofa, away from the sights, smells, and most of the sounds of betrayal. Free from emotional distractions, I did what I knew best and came up with a plan. Get him out of the room and out of sight. Beat the crap out of him where there wouldn't be too many bruises. The stomach should be in perfect order. Then throw him out the back door naked. Come back for her and throw her out naked too. This should give them the right impression and give me complete freedom without bruises and witnesses. I hope I can avoid trial. Luckily, I had the perfect shock weapon in my workshop. 2 years ago, I served in the Army Reserve, National Guard, where my skills earned me the task of clearing the trucks we took back to base. That's where I found a small device that would now come in handy. Police call them stun grenades. Slightly larger than a regular grenade, they are basically a small canister with a lever and pin ignition mechanism. They were specifically made for hostage rescue and were designed to cause little physical damage so that they could be thrown into a room full of innocent people without any significant harm. However, the explosion is accompanied by a flash with the power of 8 million candles and a shock sound of 170 decibels. The flash alone can stun a person to the extreme for at least 5 seconds. My mind, driven by newly acquired hatred, quickly formed the rest of the plan. I didn't want to ruin my house, so I couldn't just throw a grenade on the floor. I took out the device and quickly glued a short piece of rope to it, then made a loop at the end of the rope. Once prepared, I tiptoed upstairs. As I got closer, I realized that secrecy was no longer necessary. I could clearly hear a man's moans coming from behind the bedroom door. Stopping only to pick up my phone from the floor outside the door where I had dropped it, I glanced around the doorframe. It was clear that the second round of sexual activity was in full swing. My wife was satisfying her lover by caressing his manhood below the waist. After mentally rehearsing the sequence of events I had decided to carry out, I took a deep breath and took action. I stepped into the room, looped the end of the rope around the hook on the bottom of the light fixture, leaving the device hanging halfway to the floor, pulled out the pin, put it in my pocket, and stepped out of the door again, pressing my fingers tightly to my ears and closing my eyes. Despite my precautions, the effect was astounding. I could clearly feel the shock wave and the bright reflected light through my eyelids. Following the plan, I jumped back into the room again, ready for action. This time it was my turn to be surprised. I didn't know exactly what I expected to see, but it was nothing like the scene that appeared before me. Mr. Anonymous was lying on his back on the bed, and his manhood below the waist was clearly damaged. Either nature had been extremely unkind to him, or something was missing. Kate lay on her back on the floor, her eyes blank, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Confused, I went back into the hallway to think, but my thoughts were soon interrupted by two unholy screams from the bedroom, followed by various bangs and slamming doors. I began to realize that I was in deep trouble. My plan had failed. Once again, I peered around the doorframe at the scene of carnage. The man rolled out of bed and curled up on the floor, holding his groin and screeching like a banshee. Kate was nowhere to be seen, but apparently she was in the bathroom. We needed to remove the evidence. I returned to the room, looked around, and quickly found the detonator mechanism for the device, adding it to the rope. I couldn't find anything else, so I concluded that everything else had been destroyed. I headed to the bathroom very carefully. Kate was on her knees, vomiting into the toilet. I had no desire to go in and help her. I didn't care anymore. On my way to the door, I noticed something on the floor. I picked up a piece of flesh, warm and soft, resembling the tip of a tongue. On my way to the front door, I went into the first floor toilet and flushed it down. They wouldn't be able to sew it back on. Trying not to squeal the tires, I rushed down the street, once again glad that we lived so far from neighboring houses. Halfway to the garage, I dumped everything in my pockets into a roadside trash can. 10 minutes later, I was back at the small garage I call work. I called Pete and Mike, two dirty, oil-stained guys who I consider my employees and friends. They hurried to me, seeing that I was alarmed. "Guys, I need you to be my alibi for the last 45 minutes. What do you say?" "Of course, boss," they almost said in unison. "Well, before you agree so quickly, I must tell you that what I did is very serious. And after I explain it to you, you may not be so quick to answer. I don't know what I'll be charged with, but it could mean jail time." Before explaining to them, I went into my office and put on my dirty old overalls. Then I went to the trash can and grabbed an oily rag, rubbing it into my face and hands. I didn't know when the police would show up here, but I expected them. The guys looked at me, slightly stunned. I briefly told them about recent events. Mike was the first to break. He tried to hold on for a good 15 seconds and then burst out laughing. This broke the ice for Pete, who soon joined Mike and me in uncontrollable laughter. It was a full 5 minutes before we all regained control. And with handshakes and promises of support, they returned to their oily engine bays. Over the next hour, spontaneous chuckles were heard from various dingy rooms. My wife Kate was about to reap the punishment she deserved for keeping her distance from my lowly friends in the past. I was cleaning up the master bedroom that evening. I had just washed the bathroom floor. I decided to just throw out the bedding and made a mental note to buy a new rug for the bedroom. Torn curtains would also have to be removed. I tried to stay busy, avoiding thoughts. This process was not helped by constant phone calls and knocking on the door. Yes, the media was in a feeding frenzy. The combination of adultery and a man having his manhood bitten off was a story sent from heaven for them. I only opened the door once and soon turned off the phone. Finally, with nothing to distract me, I began to do some soul-searching. Do I regret what I did? Strangely, no. I hated cheaters with a passion. I've seen too many men become weak when they catch their partners cheating. The funny thing is, even before lunch, I was ready to bet my life on the fact that my wife shared this passion. I was stunned to realize how wrong I was, not to mention I was completely taken aback by Kate's motives. She seemed as devoted to me as I was to her. And our sex life had been truly wonderful, at least until recently. After several hours of internal contemplation, I could only find one single clue. I remembered how the hairs on the back of my neck stood up 2 months ago when Kate announced that she was retiring to enjoy her last days of freedom. I expected her to work until at least the 7th month of pregnancy. Something about her saying she wanted one last hurrah before having kids struck me as odd. My thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of my personal cell phone. A number few people knew. The caller ID showed it was Kate's parents' number. They lived in the same state, but about 3 hours away. I always got along fantastically with them. So I answered. After much fewer usual pleasantries, her mother got down to business. "Dave, what's going on? Do you know why a bunch of journalists are besieging our house?" "Well, they'll have to find out someday." I just couldn't bring myself to go into detail. Mom, did you watch the local news this evening, or the main news? About some cheater who bit off her lover's dignity. I always liked her mom's colorful language and her views on life. But Dan, it didn't make our conversation any easier. "Yes, Mom, look, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll get straight to it. The woman's name is Kate." Luckily, my confusion was interrupted by a scream followed by a beep. When I pressed the end call button on my phone, I noticed a warning on the screen. This reminded me that I had written the end of my marriage just 8 hours ago. I had vague memories of leaving my phone recording outside my bedroom door. I knew that if I never knew or believed the reason why Kate did what she did, I would never be able to trust any woman again. There was a good chance that I would die a lonely misogynist, doomed to a life of uselessness. With desperate hope, I started playing the video. I already knew what it was showing. The pain was too fresh to relive the scene. I opened my eyes just as I put the phone on the floor, without a visual representation, just a view of the hallway ceiling. I had to imagine Mr. and Mrs. Adultery lying side by side on the bed. I couldn't hear the sound clearly, so I downloaded the file to my computer and ran it through an amplifier. This was an important part of their conversation. "Wow, Kate, that was fantastic. The past week has been great. Do we really have to end this today? My offer still stands. Just give me your word, and I will divorce Sarah and marry you." Well, yes, it seems like it would work. A great start to a marriage with a man who left his wife and kids. No, and I love Dave too much to hurt him like that. Besides, he is a great husband and will be a good father. After today, I will be Mrs. Goody-Goody, a housewife, at least until the youngest of our children starts school. You can't love him that much. It's not him lying here next to you. No, you're mistaken. I love him very much. The moment I met him, I knew he was my only soulmate. I will never meet another. We are very much in tune sexually. I am happy to have such a good man who spoils me and will nurse me when I get a big belly from his 2 or 3 babies. No, I want nothing more than to die in his arms. Well, that was a great speech, but it begs the obvious question. Why are you with me now? At least Kate thought about it. There was silence for a good half a minute. I guess I just missed the past. I didn't get married until I was 31 and was a bit of a wild girl. I miss just walking into a bar and getting attention from all kinds of guys. The thrill of leading a guy forward and then impulsively deciding whether he gets what he wants or not. Lately, Dave has been deer hunting with his buddies every other weekend. 3 weekends ago, I decided to take a trip down memory lane and check out a bar. That resulted in one night that was okay but unsatisfying. Then last Saturday, I happened to walk into the bar you were at. And here we are. God, you're so cold, Kate. Just consider this the last gory anyway. What are you complaining about? Come here. I said it had to end today. I didn't say it had to end right now. I turned off the sound. At least now I knew I was a good lover and husband. The problem wasn't me. The following days passed in complete disappointment. 2 days later, the reporters demobilized and left my quiet street. The hospital administrator called me and said that Kate would like some pajamas. I missed this one. She would have to endure those humiliating hospital gowns. 2 days later, her father called me. He apologized for his daughter's behavior and expressed hope that I would continue to keep in touch with him. To sweeten the deal, he reminded me that he has another daughter who was recently divorced. Sorry, Dad, it's just too weird. 4 days after this event, he appeared on the news again. Mr. Not So Big was released from the hospital. Journalists dug up something and exposed him as a serial cheater, So they were pleased to announce that although the surgeons had succeeded in sewing his manhood back together, it was very unlikely that it would achieve any of its intended functions. At the end of that week, I received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Barton, or Sarah as she insisted I call her, was a pretty lady with sad eyes. She told me that she had heard rumors that I might have some evidence that could help her in her divorce case. I explained that it might be true, but I couldn't admit it without exposing myself. She understood everything and was very apologetic for asking. I told her that I thought there was such an abundance of circumstantial evidence that she wouldn't need what I had. If this turns out to be wrong, I will persuade her to return and perhaps change her mind. There was such sadness in her that I felt sorry for her. Pulling out the video file, I played her only the aftermath of the big explosion. The shock of her husband's screams made her cower at first, but she soon pulled herself together. Suffice it to say, she was not very sad when she left. Being the helpful guy that I am, I invited her to come pick me up when the sadness returned. Oh yeah, that wasn't the last time I saw Sarah Barton. The last visitor I received was probably the strangest. On Saturday, I answered the door to the detective I had spoken to at the house on the day of the big event. The suit disappeared, leaving only jeans and a shirt. "Hey son, no, I won't come in. I just wanted to say that if there was insufficient evidence, I recommended that the case be closed." Hearing my gratitude, he turned to leave but stopped and looked back. "Listen, at the end of the year, I will retire. If I come back after this, will you tell me how you did it?" I just smiled and wished him a good day. Kate's letter arrived the following Tuesday. "My dear Dave, I can't express how ashamed and sorry I am that I did this to you. I understand perfectly why you couldn't bring yourself to visit me, and I forgive you unconditionally. I have never thought about the full consequences that could arise from my actions. Of course, I never imagined that my parents would actually disown me. I know that I have lost your love, trust, and respect forever, and this pains me more than I can express. I will understand if you never want to speak to me again, but it may help you heal if you allow me to explain why I did what I did. Please be assured that it's all my fault. Doctors say I won't be able to speak normally for a long time, and if possible, they believe I may have bitten off the tip of my tongue when I bit it. They told me about some tongue-stretching technique that could restore some function. I hope this works, and I can at least get back to my career as a distraction from the bleak, loveless, childless future I'm facing. Ask for anything you want in the divorce, and I will sign it. If you can find it in your heart to keep me on your health insurance in the near future, I will forever be grateful. Farewell, my love. I only wish for your happiness in the future. I hope I haven't completely ruined your life. Yours, Kate, or as you may know, your unfaithful wife." I must say that the letter touched my heart to the point where I immediately changed my previous decision and sent her pajamas to the hospital. Now I'm trying to find Mick and Pete's phone numbers. I owe them a beer, or a crate for each of them.